right. Are we ready?
Yes. Welcome everybody to Ghana. I know you hear Kwaba all of the time, but the Groonies or Frafra say Leazarde, which is the same welcome. And
Medose.
Medase, okay. Indase. Yeah. Okay, cool. They say impo, yeah. That's how they say thank you in the Gruni language. But anyway, couple of things real quick. People ask me, so I'll jump out right quick. The first one, a lot of people ask me why we did the African Ancestral Wall. And I think if you saw some of Bomani's other videos, you know why. But basically, in a nutshell, we were going around dealing with the youngsters and trying to go in and out of all these schools. And of course, it's turned out to be a little bit taxing. So we ended up saying I had some land here and I had this wall, and I said I got a brilliant idea. I'll just make the wall with the historical figures, and we'll do field trips. And so that's what we've been doing. We've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds by now. Groups come here all the time with the students. I actually didn't anticipate it was going to be more of a touristy thing too, which is great. But I mean, that was my number one audience is still the babies, you know, and y'all know why. So that's one thing. The second. That's right, socialization process. We'll talk about that as we go along. And another thing that people ask me a lot is about how did I choose who's on the wall? Basically, I made a long list of attributes that I wanted to talk to the children about, or wanted to infuse in them or tell them about in our ancestral heritage. And so once I made all that list, then I kind of went and start mapping people back into that. That's why sometimes you'll see people you never heard of, but there's something specific about their thing that I want to talk about. And so that's how that got there. So a lot of people you'll know, of course, and some you won't, but that's how they were selected. There's always a lot. One other thing, I try not to have too many Ghanaians and too many American Africans, because, because people come and say, where is this person and that person? And I could fill the wall up with just those two groups, so we have to try to spread it around. So we're going to go through here as slow or as fast as you like. And the heat is not too bad today, so I think we will still.
Oh, okay.
It's all good, Jerry. Let's make it fast.
Okay. I think we kicking it today.
We have a lot of people have done pre.
Yeah, and a lot of people have seen this, so we'll just keep pushing. Just get the feel, the pictures, any questions, and the same presentation more or less on YouTube. Yeah. And I like to always let my daughter start off with Apoko Kanyani. It's my daughter Malevna. Let me come this side because of this tree.
She's gorgeous. She is, yeah.
Oh, well. All right, Malevna, tell them about Apoko Kanyani.
This is Apoko Kanyani. Apoko Kanyani is a far-from woman from the northern parts of Ghana. Young Apoko and their brothers settled in a place called Bukere. This was the time when Africans were being caught by slavers and sent to work as slaves outside of Africa. So one day the slavers came and they didn't see any men. So they saw Apoko Kanyani pounding millet with a pistol. And they asked her where the men were. And she didn't understand their English. So she pretended to point the pistol to the bush. Right when the slavers burst in, Apoko quickly used the pistol to hit his head, and he collapsed and died instantly. The rest never came back to the village. She's a hero to her people. They say, Sandungala Lebgeze, which means the pistol turned into blood. Thank you.
Thank you, Malevna. Oh, I like these. I haven't seen the little ankh here. Later, yeah. Okay, so we'll keep going. Queen T, the main thing that the children, I'm going to talk more in terms of why I did it, since a lot of y'all can follow up on some of these. I really wanted them to, here's where I get them to know that ancient Kemet is ancient Egypt, because all of them, of course, think that the Arabs did all of that, plus maybe Yul Brynner, And so we talk about the Africanness of ancient Kemet, and this is what I do. Queen T, 18th Dynasty, influential queen. Here I get to Garvey, and of course I'm a Garveyite, so we talk about that a little bit with the children, mainly making the point that we think we have to build something of power on the African continent to provide protection and opportunities for the race. So I got Marcus Garvey, Up You Mighty Race, you can accomplish what you will. I'm going to trust that most of you all know Marcus Garvey with the UNIA, largest organization of black people the world has ever seen. And then I come on to Nkrumah. Well, of course, all of the youngsters know who Nkrumah is because we're here in Ghana. But what a lot of people don't know, including their teachers and all, is how much influence Garvey had on Nkrumah. So I use this quote here talking about Nkrumah saying he, studied all of the so-called great European thinkers, but the one that really drove his enthusiasm was Marcus Garvey. So things like the Black Star line, these things that are common right now in Ghana, I let them know these things came from Marcus Garvey. So that's always important to put Garvey in context. And after that, they know, okay, this guy is somebody. Of course, and since we're here, we got Jonas Kabu, the founder of the place New Ningo, where we're standing, and Jama the First, which is the first chief that he brought with him, or they came here out of Old Ningo when they split up. As I said before, Leazare, which means welcome, and we got our red, black, and green flag. For you all, I don't think I have to explain that one, but for the Ghanaians, I let them know it's, red is the blood, and the black is the people, the green being the land and all that we have. Big Jamaican flag because I'm having that kind of represent the other hemisphere. Western side, of course, the Ghana flag, Ethiopian flag because it's never been colonized. Red, black, and green. So that's why we. Yeah, that's what we got there. So let's. Yeah, is it really hot to y'all? This is nice.
No, I love it.
When did y'all get here? It was hotter yesterday.
All right, buddy, yo.
I'm happy about it because I'm gonna go home.
Just stay in front, like right now. Stay in front so you get pictures
It's freezing.
of us moving along the wall. Get some of us and also get some of the wall.
Y'all can hold
So
right
family,
here.
we're gonna get you all this wonderful documentation.
Not me, I'm taking all this on.
Okay, so very quickly for you all who haven't seen our earlier videos, what I try to do here with the youngsters and their teachers is let them know that Africans were the parents of humanity with Eve, and of course they all have the European Adam and Eve. So we get a chance to talk about that and relate the fact that for more than 2/3 of human history, no one had left the African continent. So then we get into sometimes when we have time about melanin and the changing of colors and changing of the physical attributes of each racial group based on the environmental factors, these kind of things. This one a lot of times starts a lot of contention off because, they've been raised on that Adam and Eve that they raised us on, so we got to work through that. And the preachers will say it's 6,000, not 200,000. I said, let's go on to the next chart when they start that. All right, Chinua Achebe, Nigeria. We all know him as a great author. So I know a lot of the children and their teachers have read Things Fall Apart, but we talk a little bit more about what Achebe really represents in terms of African culture and giving us a good idea about what happened in our past cultures. Asa Hilliard, a lot of you know Asa, who taught a whole lot of us along the way. Asa is just a brilliant Egyptologist, of course, a psychologist, a teacher, left us with baseline essays and all these other kind of things. The main point that I took from Asa was that we have to do something to socialize, get control of the socialization of our children. So that's really in a nutshell what this wall is about. Ya Santiwa, I think you hear more about her, Queen Mother Jisu, who struggled against the British with Ya Santiwa, the 100 Years of War and all of this. Didan Kimathi, a lot of y'all remember they used to say Mau Mau, and which was really the Kikuyu Land Freedom Army. This one is interesting for the Ghanaians because Jerry Rawlings' son is named Kimathi, so now they all kind of wonder where that name came from. So once I explain that to them, then that's interesting for the school children and all. But he struggled against the British, for we all don't know, British trying to take the best land, still have a lot of it actually in Kenya. In Zinga, she struggled against the Portuguese. This is good for the children to go that far back to realize that there were people who were struggling to keep this slave trade thing from jumping off the way it did, of course, and she struggled against the Portuguese basically all of her life. Ajete is one of the local heroes. He's a Ga man. Of course, they fought with the British and everywhere back in the war. The British didn't want to give them their due. When the brothers went to go get their due, three of them were shot, Ajete being the senior of the three. And that sparked the Accra riots, is what, the beginning of the unraveling of the colonial order here in Ghana. So he's a hero. Maurice Bishop, of course, a lot of these places like Grenada and all, especially in the Caribbean, of course, no one has ever heard of here in Ghana. So this gives me a chance to talk a little bit about how Africans were spread across all of these islands in the diaspora and all. And of course, Maurice Bishop being a great leader, I think they got rid of him because they didn't want a black Castro in the Caribbean. And of course, we know about the American invasion in 1983. Namatan, Amazon warriors, these are the sisters who fought in Dahomey, which is Benin, against the French so effectively. When Bomani was here a year and a half, 2 years ago, a year and a half, there was one of the sisters that said these were the people who were modeled in the
Black Panther movie.
These sisters fighting. So that was something that they brought to us in an earlier video. Edward Wilmot Blyden, some of us know him as the father of Pan-Africanism, certainly one of the intellectual fathers. Islam, Christianity, and the Negro Race is one of the more popular books. Anyway, we'll just keep going. One of our brilliant thinkers. Steve Biko, this is a chance I get to explain to the children about apartheid. And I tell you, I ask it every time, raise your hand if you know about apartheid. And none of them ever have heard the word. None of them have ever heard the word. So then I have to go into what apartheid is about, him being anti-apartheid and the black consciousness movement and all this. Yes, sir.
So is he like friends with Nelson Mandela then?
No, this was...
Nelson was in jail, was still in prison.
Well,
They carried on the movement on the outside.
yeah,
Okay.
when they
they
killed
killed
him.
him.
Brother.
Of course, they knocked him out as a young man, as you can see, based on his ideas. Sonny Ali, this is when we get to talk about Ghana Mali Songhai, because most of the children here in Ghana don't realize that this Ghana was named after the first Ghana, empire in West Africa, and the Songhai Empire being the biggest and the latest of the three empires. And so we talk about Sonny Ali and his leadership and his organization, his navies, all this kind of thing. That gives the children a sense that, we've had this organized civilization with provinces and everything under West African suzerainty. The Hansen, I just mentioned the struggle against the French. They call him the Great Shark, and the Namatan or Amazon warrior women, of course, were part of his defense forces. Mary McKeeba, Mama Africa. Most of the teachers have heard of her, at least. But once I've introduced the apartheid idea, then I can talk about her being exiled for 3 decades and all of the things that go along with her resistance in terms of singing and culture and keeping the message alive and the pressure on the anti-apartheid regime. Sheikh Anta Diop, a lot of y'all know him, of course. He pretty much closed the book on the people of Kemet, or people in so-called Egypt. And none of the other Egyptologists could even hold a match to what he and Obenga did back in '74 Cairo conference. Dessalines, I get to talk about another Caribbean country, which is Haiti. Explain to them about the Haitian Revolution. I talk a little bit more about it when we get down to Toussaint Louverture. Jean-Jacques Dessalines. And how he gave and this is another time I get to talk about the natives of the Caribbean, who in this case call their place Haiti. And when J.J. Dessalines came back in, they said, we're going to give you your name back. So a lot of the children here don't know anyone was in the Caribbean. Yeah, they don't even know it. I mean, there's so much. But, we're getting them slowly.
Saint-Domingue. What's Dahomey?
Dahomey is Benin.
Okay, that was the former name.
Yeah, it used to be. I thought, sorry I didn't say that.
You may have.
Yeah, Dahomey has been in. George Washington Carver, of course, the agricultural genius of his time in America and really throughout the world. Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, we know him. We talked to them about how he tried to organize something based on Ujamaa, trying to have some kind of family collective, economic and social situation there in Tanzania. Ephraim Mamu, he was a man from Peke. He's an Ewe man who composed some of their music and did a lot of things Africanizing and trying to maintain the African tradition, culture, and everything in the face of the European onslaught. Harriet Tubman, I get to tell them about slavery. I think I said in another video Bomani did that some of the children, I was talking about slavery, and I said something about the fact that we hadn't been, you know, without pay, and they got quiet, and I said, what's wrong? They all thought we were getting paid. So I said, well, no wonder y'all think we got money. You know, 400 years of checks. Yeah, you know, well invested, we should all blown up. No, it was all free. So,
yeah, what a sham education system.
yeah, I mean, that's what we're working with. Samora Machel, Mozambique, another, you know, freedom fighter, Mozambique. So we tell him a little bit about how he was killed and what he was doing and how he, you know, fought the Portuguese. Nanny of Jamaica. This is an important one because we get a lot of interest in Jamaica here in the country. So as some of you may know, a lot of the things in Jamaica, some of the names, Chematang or Champong, Kudjo, and some of the rest are Akan names. And so to tell them about her, you know, of course, getting her own part of the island and being a Maroon that basically fought for her own sovereignty for the group, that's very, very good for them. Haile Selassie, Ethiopia. You know, a lot of the Rastas don't know that's Rastafari, believe it or not. But we kind of go through a little bit about what he did, the reforms. I like to talk a little bit about, with the children, about how the American Africans were, and Africans throughout the diaspora, struggled so hard to try to support the Ethiopians when the second Italian invasion came with Mussolini and all. So even the founder of the Ethiopian Air Force was an African, what they call American African Robinson. So there's a lot to say about Haile Selassie, OAU, reform, and all the rest. Kigon Pianke, or PA, from the 25th dynasty, ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet. So this is again showing the blackness, even this late in the dynastic period. It's the 25th dynasty, ancient Kemet. Shaka, the Zulu king. A lot of people some of the people will have seen the movie. So we talk about how he was able to consolidate. Even if you were on the receiving end of that, you may not have liked it so much, but it did at least put enough space between us and them to where we could maintain some level of sovereignty for some time. Fannie Lou Hamer, I wish I could show you. I'm going to have to get it to you. We just had young children on the 23rd, and they were doing all of these, playing all of these different people. We had 15 of them, so we had some young sisters doing Fannie Lou Hamer. They were great. You know, I am Fannie Lou Hamer, blah, blah. You know, I wrote the scripts for them, so make sure we got the proper stuff in there. You know. But they don't know that, you know, voting, even in my lifetime, when I was a child, was not just a given, you know, and they can't believe in America that everybody didn't have free right to vote all of the time. So we talk about what she went through just to gain the franchise for African people in the U.S. Tugbe Sri, well, now these are some of the more famous Ghanaians. Tugbe Sri, coming out of the Volta region. He's the one that brought most of them, the Anglos, through southern Togo and Ghana. Those are airways. Then we go on to one of the main Ga leaders at the turn of the century. Of course, he had to struggle against British imperialism, along with trying to reform other things going on here in Ghana. I've met several of people from his line, so I get a chance to hear the details of why they have trouble even today deciding who is the proper Gamansi or God King, coming down from the different lines. Menes, this is always, or Narmer, this is always very important, because if they have any history in Egypt, there'll be something in there about Narmer or Menes, but there will never be any pictures. There'll be some names, and then they only show pictures when they get to the Ptolemaic period, when they can show these European pharaohs, right? So we have to show them what the first dynasty pharaohs look like, and we know this is in the French Louvre somewhere, so we know that's how they look. So it's really a point of confusion, because once again, they've been seeing all of these figures and they don't know what to think. So, but I say this is actually the real one. When we get with the children afterwards, I even showed them the pictures of the actual, you know, bust and everything, so they can see it.
Yeah, he doesn't look Arab, man.
No, he doesn't look Arab, and like I said, he don't look too much like Yul Brynner either, you know, with Charlton Heston and all the rest of it. So, I mean, this is kind of a cognitive dissonance going on with these, with the preachers and with the teachers and everyone, because they've just been inundated for generations now with these images, and it's really hard for them to swallow. Cabral, of course, one of our most brilliant strategists, thinkers. Some of the works that some of you may know, Return to the Source and Unity and Struggle and all that. But basically, more than anyone, I won't say single-handedly, but he had the biggest impact on collapsing the Portuguese system of colonial power in Africa. He just wore them out, wore them down. Imhotep is, my boy sometimes does Imhotep, but I don't see him around now. That's okay. Imhotep being, of course, we know world's first multi-genius. Sometimes we have the, I had some doctors here once, I maybe mentioned this before, and they didn't believe about him being the world's first physician or medical doctor, and so they had to go off and look for themselves before they could even believe that when they did their oath, they were talking about Asclepius, which was this man. So, multi-genius, world's first medical doctor, architect, astronomer, poet, and all the rest. Now we get back to the great Toussaint Louverture. Oh, you missed Imhotep. That's all right. I'll let you do Nakbeva or something. Okay. Toussaint Louverture, so a lot of us know him. But this again, for the youngsters to know that this group of Africans rose up and beat Napoleon's army, because they teach them just enough history to know Napoleon's name. So as far as they know, that is like the guy, you know. And now here, this brother, they stomped them down and then got back in power for themselves. And you think of the enormity of that victory. It's really mind-boggling when you think of these Africans on this island taking control. Yes, sir.
How long ago was that Imhotep?
2600 BCE. That's the time
So
frame.
we're looking at what?
Oh, well, you know, 4,000 years.
4,000 years? That's a long
Plus.
time.
Yeah, you know. And it's not like we're just speculating. I mean, we have the actual, you know, procedures and the texts and the things he was doing to, you know, remedy certain illnesses and even surgical procedures. So all of that was there. So, so you see we had 15 of them, and they had to memorize a good little bit, but not just memorize it, but we had to study it, so you knew what you were talking about. So the northern groups that you hear of, the Mamprusis, the Nanumbas, the Dagombas, the Moshi, even in Burkina, all of these all come down this line of Nakbeva. Okay, we have Osei Tutu, which you'll hear more about if you go to,
Asin Mansell,
well, no, if you go to Kumasi, because he's the first
Kumasi.
Asante Hine, first king of the Ashantis, and they'll tell you about all the circumstances around that. So we'll keep moving. Thomas Sankara. I like to tell the children about Sankara for a couple of reasons. Number one, he was one young man who decided he would not just buckle under to these international financial institutions, IMF and all of that. Of course, I don't say it that way to the children. And also, Burkina Faso, meaning land of the upright people, and bringing a lot of women and other things into his administration. So I like the youngsters to know that that's what he was about. And plus, he was very close to Jerry Rawlings, the former president here. Now the young ladies, well, and the young men, I like to tell them about Amina Walls, because this is the one, once again, they learned something about the Roman army. So if they pass their test, they know the Roman army at some point had taken over in ancient Kemet. And so, but they also learned that they were also the most powerful army, la la la. Then we tell them about the Kandakis of ancient Kush, and how these Kandaki queens were able to repel the Romans and force them into a treaty that lasted 300 years. Amina Walls, from what I read, even forced Augustus Caesar to be the one to actually sign the treaty. So they hear all about the Roman Empire and how great they were. My children in their class can tell you what colors they wore, all of that. And now we show this is to stomp them, sent them home. 300 years we had enough capacity to keep them at bay. Now we can't last 3 days. But we had that kind of power, and we should know we did. Menelik II, of course, we talk about colonialism, which they don't really know much about colonialism, even though they know the word. So I usually have to talk a little bit about this more in depth with them, what colonialism was, and that way they can appreciate Menelik being the only one through force that did not allow one of these European powers to take them over, in this case, the Italians. Malcolm X, I use this one because the children like to know what X is for. Why is it X? So it gives me a chance to talk to them about my last name and some of these other names coming from the plantation and how he refused to do that. So he just put the X there. And so we even do a little skit sometimes afterwards where we go in and show a family, then have different people being taken out of the family during the off the slave ship. One in Brazil, that one ends up to Santos. One in Cuba, and that's Martinez. One in Jamaica, and that's Williamson. And then another, like this, to show one family of one name breaking up in all of these different surnames, within 30 days, or whenever they were getting off the slave ship. So we use that to introduce that, and of course we talk about Malcolm Chiswell, another one of the great Zulu leaders who struggled against the British. Lots of victories there. Akhenaten, depending on how old they are, we'll talk a little bit about Akhenaten and even Moses. Some discussion about these religions that we're all part of, and how a lot of these we can trace back to Nile Valley civilizations, and talk about the admonitions of Ma'at versus the 10 Commandments and all the rest. But with the children, they're really more interested in the picture, knowing that this was a strong man in ancient Kemet. Bob Marley, they usually all know because of the music. But we talk a little bit about uniting Africa and some of the other things that he sang about. Wangari Maathai, we know her about, planting the trees and all. So I like the children to know this ecological thing everyone's talking about, climate change and how to save the place. But we had someone really at the forefront of that, which was Wangari Maathai. Singbe Pie, of course, a lot of you all saw Amistad, so you know about the mutiny on the Amistad. But this, I'm letting the children know how desperate we were to get back to Africa, that we rise up out of chains and mutiny a ship with the sole objective of getting back to Africa, because a lot of them have the sole objective of getting out of Africa. Fred Hampton, the chairman, our man, the chairman. So a lot of the children or young people want to know why he died so young, so we have to explain the ideals of the Black Panthers and why the U.S. government had to get rid of them. Samuel Maharero, here we talk about in Namibia, the Herero people and the basic genocide that was perpetrated against them. So the children get to have some idea that even when they hear about the Holocaust later on in their studies in Europe, that there was some other Holocaust going on, perpetrated by the same people, by the way, even before World War II. Oliver Tambo, of course, he kept ANC going during this time. So the children, this will reinforce some of the things about apartheid. I really want them to leave this presentation knowing something about apartheid and what it was really like, because when I describe segregation and some of these things that happened in the Americas, they can draw the parallels between what they did in South Africa and what we went through with Jim Crow. Agostinho Neto, another Angolan medical doctor, head of the not just the army, but of course the first president after they got out of their colonial status with the Portuguese. Zabeth of Haiti is another one. My daughter, Malebna. I guess she disappeared. She did this one the other day too, but we'll let it go. But she did I Am the Zabeth, and she went through the whole thing. This is a young girl who just basically never gave up fighting the French and the slave plantation system. No matter how much they caught her, it's about the indomitable human spirit. So I like the young girls especially to hear her story. Bebere, Sierra Leone with the Temne people. This is my chance to tell the youngsters about the hut tax and the absurdities of the things that the Europeans were doing to extract money and work out of us, even here in our own lands. They had the hut tax, and of course he fought against the British, against the whole idea of the hut tax. We can talk more about that. Felix Mumi, he's here. Not only was he kind of a young revolutionary politician coming up, but he went to Geneva to negotiate with them in Switzerland, and he was poisoned in Switzerland with thallium. So kind of, and they were planning on the thing lasting like 5 days. They wanted to give him enough so he would die 5 days later in another African country. I think it was Guinea or somewhere he was supposed to be going. But instead, they overdosed it. He died that morning, and so they had a scandal on their hands because it was clear that there in Geneva, with all of their neutrality, they still poisoned this African. And of course, they're judge, jury, and executioner, so they got away with it. But the point is, be careful even when you think you're in these neutral places, that it's fair to all people in America, because they're all on somebody else's side. It's not yours. Sekahune, also South Africa too. Here I like to tell them about the Boers. This is my chance to tell them about, it's the Dutch also, because, their ideas of the Dutch right now are, if I could get to Amsterdam, blah, blah. I said, no, the Dutch are the Boers, the Afrikaners, who are wreaking all this havoc in southern Africa. And this man, Sekahune, fought very effectively against the Boers. Unfortunately, he had to go on to fight the British, because the British were saying, the area you think belongs to you now belongs to us with this new British mandate, whatever it was. So he had to turn around and fight them too. But I think the point with the children is, you have Dutch, and I just got through telling you, even if you're in Switzerland, and then of course the British, all of these people are working the same agenda. Sister Nahanda, of course we know, in Zimbabwe they had to struggle against the British. She was the spirit woman behind the first Shemarenga. So I always like the children to know that this is a sister that gave, kind of like Yah Santua and Fatima in Haiti and some of the other ones, that gave that spiritual charge to the people to rise up and to get their land back, or freedom or sovereignty, whatever it is. And of course, when they caught her, they had to hang her, because you don't send these type into exile because they got too much power. Martin Luther King Jr., of course, this is the only one on the wall outside of maybe a couple of Ghanaians that most of the children over, say, 8 or 9 have heard of. And of course, I have to put our spin on Martin Luther King and who he was and some of the things that he opposed. And so we know something about that. Hatshepsut, of course, not only do they think there were no black pharaohs, but they certainly didn't think there were any black female pharaohs. So this is like totally discombobulating the teachers and the children, that I tell them about Hatshepsut and her influence and her temples, and I'll have pictures of all of that when we meet afterwards with the children. Kaliterat, this is another one where I have to tell them about Nubia. Now by this time the Arabs are in charge of Egypt, so that makes sense to them now. I have to take a moment to explain how long it took. This is 641 AD, and when the pyramids and all of the things that they now associate with Arabs or whites or someone is, all those thousands of years ago. So now the Arabs are in charge. They want to move south, and of course they run into Kaliterat and the people in this area of Nubia, which would be northern Sudan today. And they fought them to a standstill, and that forced them into a 700-year treaty. So 300-year treaty with the sister, 700-year treaty. So I'm trying to let the youngsters know that at one time we had some parity of power where we could stop bad things from happening to us. We've lost that parity, and so the result is what we see. Muhammad Ali, the teachers usually know about the boxing, but I try to let them know about why they stripped him of his title and what he stood for other than just pugilistic excellence. Lat George Joke, Senegal. This is another one I tell them about him having his own empire there in Cairo and having to struggle against the French who wanted to run railroads through. So then I can tell them about, they not only were running railroads through there, run railroads all over the African world trying to get their resources out. And some people are still doing the same thing today, by the way. And, and they're not European. So anyway, we talk about him, and he died in battle, struggling for the sovereignty of his people. Antonio Maceo, another chance to talk about the Caribbean, and then of course him leading the army, one of the leaders of the army of the Cubans as they fought the Spaniards for the War of Independence, one of the 2 leading generals there in that war. Patrice Lumumba, of course, of the Congo. This gives me a chance not to talk so much about Patrice Lumumba because he wasn't there that long, but gives me a chance to talk a lot about the rubber trade and how we lost 10 million Africans in the rubber trade, and how this was the time when the automobiles and the bicycles and all the rubber was needed around the world. King Leopold, small Belgium, and the hands being cut off. So afterwards, when we meet, I can always show them some pictures of people holding up the hands of the folks who didn't collect enough rubber for the Belgians and all of that kind of stuff. So let them know that, because these now today are called their development partners, same people. Okay, in Kwabanika, this was in Tanzania, struggling He was with the Hehe people. They had the 1891, I think, was the rebellion of the Hehes against the Germans and all their atrocities there in East Africa. And of course, they took his head and took it with them back to Germany as a trophy. And finally, when the British beat out the Germans, the British took the head, and the children are all like, what? What? I said, these are your development partners. So anyway, struggle against the Germans. Hannibal, I'm going to move. There was some big cracks and some problems, so we're going to move Hannibal to another place. But of course, our man Robert Mugabe passed, so we're getting ready to hook Big Bob Mugabe up. Yeah, he didn't leave us long ago, but he's an instant addition, So since I had to change that anyway, so we're painting Mugabe. If you don't know about Mugabe, then go sit on the bus. Okay, Elijah Muhammad. Of course, we know about all of the problems that got a lot of press, but sometimes we forget that's the closest thing to a nation within that nation that we've ever had in terms of, banking and business and educate schools and all of the rest of it. So, as Amos Wilson said, be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because it was black Muslims there to serve black people, as opposed to this universal business that they try to sell us. So Elijah Muhammad earned his space. Ida B. Wells, I think I told you in another video, if you watch them, where the children think this was Michael Jackson. But this is when I get to tell them about lynching, because, I read somewhere where like 80% of the Africans lynched in America were business owners. Yeah. So, they kind of gave us this idea that was some young boy who, whistled at a white woman and they hung him. No. They were leaving them alone. If you had the temerity to have your own business outside of their economy, then you got to go, because you're a bad example for autonomous economic development. So that's why they were lynching a lot of them, and also just to terrorize them. And some of it was just pure hate, But anyway, Ida B. Wells, journalist, anti-lynching campaigner, and very, very courageous woman, because of course they could have done her the same way. Kello, this talks a little bit about the Afro-Shariza party in Zanzibar. Of course, it was the Omani Arabs who had been sitting on their heads. So this is another chance for the youngsters to realize that, sometimes it's Europeans, sometimes it's Arabs, but anybody can dominate you if you haven't built your own power. So that's the message. Of course, they had to struggle to get the Arabs off their back. We've been there for generations and generations there in Zanzibar. And John Okello was the leader of that revolt that repulsed those Arabs soon after they joined Tanganyika to become Tanzania. Fela Kuti, some of the children have heard of Fela. Their parents may play Fela a little bit. I just talk about him being a revolutionary musician. Zumbi, Brazil. Once again, our children don't really understand about the slave trade and how we got to these places. But here, when I have time, I try to tell them more about the common things that they do in Brazil that they still do in West Africa, especially in terms of the religion and this kind of thing. And of course, I let them know, like Nanny from Jamaica, these Maroons would go to the mountains and establish their own strongholds. And of course, his was Palmares. I don't know if you all went there when you took your group to Brazil. It's hard to get up there.
Yeah, we didn't get out that far.
I got almost there, and we had some car trouble. But anyway.
Yeah, it takes a little planning.
But still you get to the northern Brazil, and there's a whole lot of that African culture still there. Well, Zumbi had that 100-year Palmares, which was one of the quilombos that was, of course, resistant to the Portuguese and grabbing Africans off the plantation and bringing them to freedom. I have another Brazilian here. They just happen to end up next to each other, Nascimento, and it's kind of like when we were kind of trying to learn about what's going on in Afro-Brazilian politics and culture and everything. We would read him and listen to him and all of this. So, and he was an artist in his own right. So that was kind of our connection, someone who dedicated their time to making sure the world knew about the Brazilian history, Afro-Brazilian history and culture. So Nascimento is there. Nkrumah, I think if you've seen the video before, I told you this is one that I thought was already passed, but he wasn't when we did it. But of course, coming through the anti-colonial struggle, leader in Namibia. And so he's still alive, so he's got his guaranteed place in the sun. We have our man Booker T. Washington. Some of the children said, how come you got so many Washingtons? And I said, because George Washington and his brothers and friends owned a lot of Africans. So did Jefferson, so did Johnson, so did the rest of them. So, and then this gets back to, you know, how we all lost our names. So Booker T. Washington here, and I think the video I may have told you about Dr. Tyreen Wright's book, talking about some of the other things you don't know about Booker T, supporting black causes and African students and all kinds of other things. And Tuskegee's still there and it's still kicking folks out. So, I mean, you know, kicking out graduates and these institutions. Remember, Garvey came looking for Booker T. Washington. When he came to, Booker T. had died by the time he got there, but up from slavery and all of this is what motivated Garvey to come to the U.S. B.B. King with his guitar Lucille. Of course, there's so many musicians I could have put here. I think I said on other videos, my father's favorite musician, so that's kind of weighed a little heavier than some of the other ones. But you know, we got so many musicians that, and especially we have musicians, you know, who are very, very deeply political. And so we have a lot of places and a lot of room on the wall. We'll keep going. But that's our man, B.B. King. Walter Rodney, I just happened yesterday to be listening to some lecture online by Walter Rodney, who's just one of the most brilliant people we've ever had. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa and Grounding with My Brothers are the books people know about him. But once again, for the youngsters, I'm just trying to show them that the Caribbean, even though they weren't big, produced what they could, which was intellectual production, creative production, political analysis, and a lot of it being brilliant, and no one more brilliant than Walter Rodney. And by the way, they have in Atlanta, which I just found out a few years ago, an annual Walter Rodney Festival, which I haven't gone to, but I heard is actually very good. Queen Amina, one of the great House of Queens who established a huge area, controlled the trade and everything in that part of northern Nigeria. Expert horseman, whatever you call it. And also, you know, they have what they call the Amina Walls, which if you still go to Nigeria today, you can see these walls over these huge expanses of land representing what she was in control of.
What part of Nigeria?
Zaria, northern, if you go to the north. Sometimes you'll see Zazu, but it's Zaria in the House of Land in the north, I think northwestern part of Nigeria. Yeah, still there. Eduardo Manlani, another freedom fighter struggling against the Portuguese again. Oberlin College, PhD, all of that. But, you know, these brothers felt like, look, we got to get home and make sure we're in charge of our own land. So, you know, they created Frelimo and the rest. And, you know, Michelle was one of his proteges. He was killed with a bomb, a parcel bomb. Opened the parcel, blew up and killed him. So he's one of our great, strong leaders from that period. And of course, Garrett Morgan, the children, I always kind of set them up with the traffic light. Do they know what that is? Do they know what the gas mask is? And then I tell them, well, it was an African mind that produced that. And so that's always good for them to know. In fact, I need to, as I continue with the wall, have more of the kind of inventors and these kind of people of things that they use today and know about. Because the reaction I always get on this one is very, effusive with the children. So I gotta, put that into the next round of pictures. Frantz Fanon, once again, another one from the Caribbean, brilliant thinker, Wretched of the Earth. I think a lot of you maybe read that, Black Face, White Mask. Just a brilliant psychologist, and if you listen to him, study him, and look at the black politicians in black countries today, you can see we're suffering from the same mental pathologies. Frantz Fanon. John Chilembwe, he's another one who was in America and trained in theology, and of course, when he got back to Malawi, we know what was going on there with the British, and he had to get back and fight for the sovereignty of the people there in Malawi. Sekou Touré, a lot of good things about Sekou Touré, but for a lot of the Ghanaians, they like the fact that he's the one who brought Nkrumah in after when he was, basically kicked out of Ghana and brought him in as a co-president. So the children kind of make that connection. They know Nkrumah, so that's kind of a little Pan-Africanism in effect, in action that they can kind of relate to. And also, you know, he refused, along with Mali, to join the French community. Very interesting, which was basically saying all you French African countries stay in our economic orbit. And they have been since then. And it's interesting now that they're just now starting to have some really good open debate about how that ripoff scam has been going. I mean, some of us have been screaming about it for decades, but the sister at the AU, Ambassador Ericana or something like that. Yeah, you know, she's really brought that to light, and now, you know, some of them are coming back out and saying, you know, this is a ripoff. And now everybody's like, what? This is what kind of ripoff? So we're glad that the sister put that out there. And because if you remember Gbagbo, just next door in the Ivory Coast, when they kicked him out, and you know, he's an academician, he kind of mentioned this stuff a little bit, but I mean, just the idea that he would challenge the French order even verbally was enough for them to bomb his Air Force out of existence, go in there, kick him out. You know, you can see the pictures, you can tell they raped probably, you know, I don't know, I'm on camera, but I think probably, you know, raped his wife and everything else. And all that just for the idea of this little bit of economic sovereignty, the idea. So now it's back on the table, and hopefully we'll get enough momentum to start looking at that thing. Because even the French president said, without Africa, we immediately drop into a third world nation. I mean, their leaders even said that. So it's time to get that out there. So Sekou Touré was in the forefront of saying, we're not going to be part of this arrangement. Mr. Sarah, some of you have heard of Negritude. This is when I talk to the children about the need to make sure you create your own creative space, literary movements and all of that. Make sure you know. So Mr. Sarah, great poet, great writer, started Negritude along with Senghor out of Senegal and Leon Damas out of the French Guiana, and just brilliant poet, writer. The one I always liked the most that I read anyway was Discourse on Colonialism, but he's also written plays on Toussaint Louverture, a book on Toussaint Louverture, a lot of things, just a lot of creative genius there. Samori Touré, which we know, this is when I try to let the children know again that just like Shaka, you know, sometimes you have to consolidate a lot of territory to be effective in your resistance against whoever it is. In this case, the French, and in Shaka's case, the British. And whatever you think about Samori Touré in terms of who he took over along the way, you know, he was by far the most effective resistor of French colonialism and whatever you want to call it. And of course, back into Trinidad again, back into the Caribbean, our man Kwame Touré, which we all grew up as knowing as Stokely Carmichael. You know, Black Power was popularized, at least when I was coming up, that was the face I associated with the term Black Power. And of course, he was married to Mary Makeba for a while. They lived in Guinea, and he was also Kwame coming from Kwame Nkrumah, Touré coming from Sekou Touré, All African People's Revolutionary Party, and a lot of other things. So that's Brother Kwame Touré. And of course, we have our master teachers, Dr. John Henry Clark and Joseph Yakinen, who have given their lives for us, really, in terms of scholarship, in terms of energy, in terms of access. What else can you say? I'm sure there's at least 100 books written and edited between the two of them. And those are our teachers, always available to the people, always solid, always honest, and tell you the truth about yourself, whether you want to hear it or not. Of course, here, we got the brother with the we got Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela, Mama Africa again, and the hell she went through trying to maintain some chance to have sovereignty, and of course land rights and land retention and regaining the land there in South Africa. So that's Mama Winnie. And Francis Cress Wilson, of course, giving you an idea again of the thinking ways of your development partners. So that's how far we are in the ancestral wall.
Yes.